on and unmute ourselves. So I believe that we are ready to get started. Sarah, is that?
Yep, I was just waiting for Commissioner Reed to get in there. Thank you. All right. Thank you, commissioners. This is an overview of our emergency management and emergency communications functions. Just as a reminder for anyone who might be listening, this part of our work session, these work sessions are for informational purposes only, and no decisions will be made here during this session. And I don't know, Robert and Tony, if you guys decided who was going to go first.
Yes, we did. Emergency management is going to go first. We talked about that yesterday.
Great. Okay.
And
It appears you're appearing live from the concession stand at the Douglas County Fairgrounds
that's
Community
correct.
Building.
Okay. You're out here working, so is this ready to go?
Yeah, you should be able to share
Share
this one,
here.
and then we should be able to put it in present. Do the same thing.
Sorry, guys. 1 second.
New technology.
There, can you guys see that? All right, good, great. All right, so yeah, we're gonna do a brief orientation of emergency management for you guys this afternoon. And please, anytime during our presentation, please ask questions. So I'm Robert Benecki, the director, Jillian Rodrigue, deputy director. Also on the call is Josh Taylor, who's our full-time specialist, and I think Jenny's on the call, who's our half-time administrative officer. So there's a list of our staff there on the screen. You'll see we have duty officers, 3 of them. They were like part-time. They're on call weekly, and then Josh is on that call as well. Bob Newton, probably most of you know, a longtime friend of emergency management in the county, as our public information officer. And then Jesse Williams and Doug Rhodes, they are managers for our mobile command vehicle. And just as everything is in these kinds of businesses, we are, everything we do is because of a statute or a CFR. So, starting at the federal level, coming down through the state, and then into the county. I'm not going to bore you with those, but just know that they're there. But this is probably the most important one about the local requirements, 56-2-2, and it aligns with the EMPG, which I'll talk about later, which is Emergency Management Performance Grant requirements. And what it does is it outlines what we need to do in order to stay current with the grant, but also in order to stay current with the KR and what we're supposed to be doing with the state of Kansas. So we do these things that are listed here. We have these resolutions with the other cities in the county, which why we're a county emergency management entity, and the cities have agreed to work with us in that way. And I'd like to bring out this county resolution adopting Nims. That's pretty important. And as most of you know, we've been working under a Nims structure in the current pandemic for the last over a year. So
And Robert, can you go back and tell everybody what Nims stands for again, just one more time?
National Incident Management System. Thank you, Sarah. And it's been around since the 70s. ICS has, and then Nims came about when the Department of Homeland Security adopted in 2004 and standardized it, in creating these structures and having standard guidelines for operating in disaster or emergency situations. So we will show you that chart a little later in this talk, but it's been a fluid process for us, and it's worked well in managing this pandemic, and as well as the previous emergencies, the floods and the tornado that happened in 19. So we'd like to provide some training. We'll talk about that in the future for you guys on that as well. So our budget this is our 2020 budget, just a simple chart to show you, but the MPG grant that I talked about, Emergency Management Performance Grant, it funds basically Josh and Jenny's positions. We use that 100% of that money to fund their positions here. And know that our staff, going back to staff, had a complete turnover in just, gosh, last year, end of 19. Yeah, so I had come on a couple months prior. Jillian's been here almost
started my
15 years.
year.
Yeah. And then Josh and Jenny came on about the same time back then. So, you know, and then we kind of got right into COVID just a few months later. But yeah, so we part of our funding comes to the EMPG. Part of it is through hazardous material grant that we'll talk about here in a second that we apply for every year, and we do certain things with that. You can see that from our budget, and I know we'll be in budget season before long, but we currently have been planning for tornado siren replacement and capital improvement, as well as radio replacement, which is desperately needed. And I know that thank you that we're on that short list with ECC for hopefully getting some replacements in the next couple of months. So we're pretty excited about that.
And Robert, you might note, the one thing about EMPG is that it's a dollar for dollar match grant. So we have to have for every dollar that the state gives us for that grant, we match it with a dollar within the county's budget. And the HMEP grants are similar. They're a 20% match for any funding. So a lot of our budget is matched for those to make sure that we can provide the match funding for that main grant, and then any other grants that we bring in as well.
Questions so far from anybody?
Robert, you know, would you say it's pretty common that, you know, in my experience, I don't know, every county emergency management operation receives these planning grant dollars. This is really how the state helps to fund this operation at the local level. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I would say it's a fair statement. You know,
Yeah, there's a grant, the allocation is by population, and then the county, Douglas County gets an extra grant, extra funds to provide for a planner, which is our emergency management specialist. So it's a common grant across the state.
So just, you know, commissioners have been hearing lots from me about how we work intergovernmentally, and, you know, this is an example where the state, you know, provides this, we're required to match it, but they help fund this operation at the local level. Go ahead, Robert.
yeah, thank you. And so the grants we're talking about, the MPG,
We need some medical attention here at Pavilion on the 30-minute line.
and a little medical call out in the pavilion. So, so the performance grant, it can be used for things other than staffing, but we choose to use it for staffing and for that match. So the hazardous materials grant, we apply for that every year. And I can tell you that its focus is, you know, hazardous materials transportation through our county. So that's what the focus is. Comes from the feds through the state down through us. So just to give you a snapshot of HMEP, last year's grant was for some hazardous materials training for the fire departments. And so we got that grant. They were not able to do the training last year because it needed to be in person because of COVID. So that's been extended through, they're actually gonna do that training. So 2020 training will be done next month. 2021 is a hazardous materials commodity flow study. And so what that is basically is a study that takes data from, and it's 25 different points of places. And it's a 3-county, we're leading the grant on it. It's us, Osage, and Jefferson County. We have mutual agreements with them. We're taking the lead. So these people go into field and gather data on trucks and vehicles, bring in hazardous chemicals into the country and feed all that data in. Then they'll analyze it and study for us. So we'll know and be able to plan for future exercises and training or equipment that may be needed based on what's coming into our county. So that's just kind of in a nutshell. That's going on right now. That kicked off just about a month ago, and it'll be presented this summer. And then the hazardous mitigation grant program, and that's actually, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Sure.
Yeah.
So the hazard mitigation grant, typically those funds, there's an allocation that comes from the federal level, and then there are also grant funds that are available after disasters. And so you may have seen some of the buyouts in the Lone Star area. We received that hazard mitigation grant funding because we had 2 disasters in Douglas County in 2019. So we were at the top of the list to be able to apply for those grant funds. It really focuses on how do we either lessen, reduce, or mitigate, get rid of a risk in the community? We write a plan for that so that we can identify those ahead of time. So that may be culverts, that may be buyouts, that may be other sustainable projects, generators, anything along those lines that we can help mitigate the impact of a disaster. We've had a number of these that we've run, but the most recent is the Lone Star buyout after the 500-year flood that we had in 2019.
Thank you.
My tippy toes.
Yeah, so I told her I can come on like this so we can talk. All right. And then, so plans, a big part of what we do is planning. The big one is the local emergency operations plan. That's required. And so that plan has been in a revision state for the last couple years. And, you know, for various reasons, COVID and others, we've got extension on it. The state, I say this, when I say state, the Kansas Division of Emergency Management, I usually always just say the state, but that's what I'm talking about. They have created a new template for this plan, which we are using, and we will be well ahead of the deadline, which is now August 2021. Yeah.
It's the end of this year, but that's
At
okay.
the end of this year, our goal is August. So that's what we're headed with that, and that's kind of that's a lot of what Josh does full time in his job is putting that template together, bringing in old plan with new plan, revising, and those kinds of things. So working on that. Continuity of operations, that's, you know, we work with not just in-house, but work with assist other agencies, other governments with their plans, and those are all on file, so we know what their continuity of operations plan is. Anytime, jump in here if you got more.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that came into play very distinctly with COVID. Identifying what essential functions had to be done. That also was initially when vaccinations were very limited. It was continuity of government, continuity of operations was how the state wanted local communities to identify the top folks to get vaccinated. So it may be for any number of reasons, but it's important to know what has to be done and what can be put off, what can be shared in the event of a large scale disaster or for any emergency that might impact government operations.
And then the IPP is.
So if I just jump in there, Robert, you know, the thing I think that we learned a lot this year in terms of our continuity of operations planning is, you know, I think a lot of our continuity operations planning here was based around what happens if a building is taken out by a tornado. Our continuity of operations did not envision being closed by the state government for 6 weeks. So, you know, I think this is part of the challenges that we're all facing in this pandemic is how do we look at we maybe put our plans in a box in a way that we sort of thought about how they should be put together. And we are learning how to revise that and how to think about it from a variety of different angles. And I know that I've had numerous conversations with department heads and elected officials that are like, wow, I hadn't even really thought of it that way. Cause I just assumed, you know, we would never get hit by a tornado. So I didn't need to worry about this. Well, now, you know, it really is more than that. It's about how do you continue to do the critical functions of your department or your agency when you may not have all the resources at your disposal that you're used to having.
Yeah, very true.
Go ahead.
You know, there are a lot of lessons learned over the past couple of years when it comes to emergency management, when it comes to planning, when it comes to operations, and you know, and more to come on that, Sarah. You know, I think when we slow down from this vaccination operation and we have more time to you know, after action, you know, the event that we'll have you know, better vision of where we're headed when it comes to exercising and when it comes to, you know, future equipment or plans for, I mean, we never thought we'd be doing this in the last year and a half. So yes, there's been a plan for it.
You know,
but,
Robert, I could,
go ahead.
if I could chime in too on the LEOP, on the local emergency operations plan, you know, I think one of the things that surprised me when I, you know, the first time I saw this in action is how engaged our whole community is in this local emergency operation planning process. You're going to assume the fire department's involved and you're going to assume the police department's involved, but you may not assume that the faith community is involved. You may not assume that social services are involved. Obviously, organizations like the Red Cross and the health department, but you know, I really am it is a truly intergovernmental and collaborative process to create a plan so that this community can respond to any emergency operation. And it's very, I mean, it's very broad and it's very inclusive. And that's why it takes so much work to put together, because you have to go back to each of those partners and say, like, are you invested? Are you willing to serve in this role and function? Everything from transportation to utilities to hospital health operations and, you know, human service and charitable giving. So much of our work, even with the May 2019 tornado, was related to how do we help these families and these property owners get back to their normal way of life. And you know, it was pretty quickly, the brush was cleared. It really was an issue of like, how do we manage funding? How do we move dollars to folks? How do we manage questions and all of those different things? So I think sometimes I was very unprepared for how in-depth and engaged that process is, and how it's really all in that plan.
Great, great. All right, I'm gonna move forward a little bit of time sake. So the IPP is a plan that we talk about for looking ahead and bringing in the LAPC, Local Emergency Planning Committee, which we'll talk about a little bit, a couple slides down, but to come in and ask them, what are they doing? What are their threats? What's going on in their businesses, in their government worlds, or wherever they operate out of, and then how can we work together to come up with training and exercises and improving response and mitigation. And the reason K hazard mitigation plan is what we as, go ahead.
Yeah, so our region, the state pays for this. They provide the grant funding for it. So they group us by a number of counties. So this hazard mitigation plan just looks and identifies, looks at the cities, looks at every entity, school districts, our universities, our city and county. All of those partners, our rural water districts, our townships, are all a part of that large scale plan to look ahead and identify ways that we can minimize risk so that anything that we apply for hazard mitigation funds has to be in this plan. So we have to identify it ahead of time so that we can show there was pre-planning in order to execute and get those grant funds out of it. So the hazard mitigation plan is key, but it is really nice that it's supported, and so it does not cost us additional funds, and the state makes sure that we have that so that we can use those funds as best as possible after a disaster. Or there's also some pre-disaster mitigation funds that can also be used. Those are highly competitive grants as well.
Robert, this is Commissioner Kelly. Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
On that LEOP, is that something we have a responsibility to review before you submit it, or is that something you just submit?
No, you definitely will have a review on it and an approval.
Yeah, it's new this year. The state is actually requiring that to go to the county commission prior to submission to the state. Then the state will review it. We will make any corrections or additions as they see fit. And then it has to be adopted by the county and then the cities as well.
Thanks.
And so the LAPC, which I briefly mentioned, we just had a full board meeting this morning. And this is established, you know, in this a resolution that's on file already. And it's required by statute. And you'll see, I'm going to show you the next slide. They meet quarterly, the full board. The executive team meets monthly. And just to give you an idea of the kind of entities that are part of it. So we have representation from all of these different entities on the board.
And if you look at the makeup, if you look on the website, the entities are actually identified by emergency support function. And so the LEPC is reflective of how we develop the local emergency operations plan. So it's a whole community approach with public, private, and nonprofit organizations that sit at the table with us. They also serve as the emergency management advisory board as well. So not just hazardous materials, which is typically your LEPC. We look at this from an all hazards approach to make sure that we have a full plan that covers all of the agencies across the counties, including all of our cities.
Yeah, and the right to know, community right to know.
Nope.
And so just a little bit about some lessons, learn. One of the most important things, and that is, is this collaboration that Sarah mentioned. And never did I think that I would be working with people I've worked with over in the last year and a half and get to meet. And it just, this pandemic, which is an extension of the tornado and the flooding, which was a foundation bringing those partners. So these partners haven't come to the table other than in a board meeting quarterly, and really maybe a few exercises and training, but well, then it really happened. And there was this big tornado and it's all this damage, and all these agencies came together, responded to it, and then came into the EOC and worked through problems, and then eventually got into recovery, and that's long-term recovery process, and continue to meet and learn about what kind of response for talking about what do we need to do for the next time, and how do we work together. So anyway, I'd say all that to say it gets us to where we've been in COVID, and you can see the unified command chart there at the bottom of the screen. That's been probably the most important thing in leadership, to get through the problems that we've encountered.
Copy.
That we've encountered over the last year, and working together. At one point we felt like in May of last year, because Douglas County was doing so great, that we're going to go into a recovery model, and we changed the structure and had recovery support functions, and we worked that for a period of time and realized we're not in recovery. We're in recovery. We're always going to, but we're still responding to this thing. And then as we saw it unfold, there was a couple different versions of this, but this, what you see there will be what we'll be under until it's adaptable. To give you an example, we've just realized that there may be a need for some people to get to the table to talk about this new funding that are coming down. So we put together a task force for that funding, the rescue funding. So they'll have their first meeting tomorrow afternoon. And it's through those kind of task force that some of this work, like where the CARES Act money came down, and that actually launched out of that recovery support function that we're talking about. But all those players at the table from the community, from all, you just see the leaders in this chart here, but there's a whole bunch more people that are working behind the scenes and working in these groups. So just been kind of amazing. It's just been huge for me to see and be part of. And I hear those comments from other people too, and it's really makes you proud to be part of this organization and this community. And so this is a little bit about, hey, what are you guys doing? So county commissioners. So one of the things we'd like to do is host some training here for elected officials, and for you and for the others throughout the county. But Commissioner Kelly, you talked about the plan, and that's part of what you guys do, those policies and plans, review and approve. Hopefully participate in activities that we have, whether those be exercises or trainings, to keep you new and up on what we're doing and talking about. And then just the decisions, and of course your role is the protection and well-being of the citizens in a disaster, but we'll look to you for those kinds of things. But I will say that when we activate an EOC, or Emergency Operations Center, when we activate that space, that there's a place for elected officials, and we need you, but we may ask you to be in a different place. So just know that, we may need you we may be asking things of you to publicly to work with the public information officers closely. We have a team of PIOs that have worked through this whole pandemic together. They meet weekly as well, and they have solid messaging coming, the same messaging, and that's what we need in the time of disasters: communication and the right and the same consistent messaging to people, and that's where a lot of where we would ask of you, your help. And there's just a list of resources that I know Robin can have this on file if you want to go back and look at just some things you can go and read about, some of the stuff we talked about today and the grants. And then most importantly, just yesterday, emergency management got that award that's right there in the middle of the page from Douglas County Public Health that we're very, very proud of. So we were recognized at a luncheon yesterday. And I would say this to you that I couldn't attend, but Jillian was there and she accepted the award on behalf of emergency management. And in her acceptance speech for that award is on social media, and she did a really good job talking and really upbeat for the group. So I'm gonna encourage you to do that. And I've left 4 minutes. I told Tony I would take 30. So what do you guys have questions or comments for us?
This is Commissioner Portillo. Robert, thank you very much for that presentation. I really appreciate it. I know that this role is still relatively new to you, but you mentioned that there was pretty significant turnover after you took on the role. Could you just help me understand a bit why that happened? What was going on there?
Sure. And I don't know, maybe Sarah, why don't you jump in here because it was before me. So
Yeah, we had our director of emergency management left in 2018, I think, right, Robert? And at that point in time, we also had a vacancy in the, we also, just in that same time period, also had the other 1.5 staff, the planner and the administrative officer also left. So Jillian has been our long-term consistent force in that. So at that point in time, we moved Robert into the role as director and he was able to fill the 2 planner positions. And so when we were at the point in time when we were going through the May 2019 tornado, we had an interim director of emergency management and an interim county administrator and an interim fire chief. So it was the school of hard knocks that month.
Thank you.
And I will say, Commissioner, that we've created, I didn't mention this earlier, we created an internal strategic plan that our team worked on together, and we've gone back a little distracted with COVID, but we've gone back to that plan and did some updating on it, and that's available for you. If it's not on our website, then we can get that to you to review, just kind of see where we are and where we're headed in the next few years.
This is Commissioner Kelly. Robert, really appreciate the report. I'll tell you, when I came on the commission, I had little to no understanding of what emergency management did. And in the 2 years and a couple of months here, I think our entire community, and as evidenced by the awards you received yesterday, has started to recognize the incredible value of emergency management. That wouldn't be the case if you all hadn't produced in these very challenging times, should we say. And I really just want to highlight, I know we'll talk about it later in the meeting, but you all are a huge part of us being where we are on vaccine rollout and everything that's going on there. We have a lot to be proud of in Douglas County. And I just personally want to tell you how much we appreciate the work you've done. You've stepped into this role and really taken on some tremendous leadership, and it doesn't work as well as it does without you and your team. So just a ton of gratitude from me. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Reed here. I don't think I have any questions. I really appreciate the thorough overview and just want to echo fellow commissioners' gratitude for you all. And I actually got to know Douglas County Emergency Management in my role about a decade ago at the Roger Hill Volunteer Center. And when I was there, I got the opportunity to be a part of kind of some training exercises that would include the volunteer center and really being the spot where community members could come and respond and be put to work in case of a disaster. So to see, to be a witness to seeing some of that play out in response to the 2019 tornado was really impressive. And I heard a lot of incredible feedback, and I appreciate the acknowledgement you and Sarah made earlier about how that is really based on a model of an incredible amount of community partners doing collaborative and collective work and figuring out what their piece of it is. And that's important to me because it's an acknowledgement that when disaster happens, there's a whole host of layers underneath that and how it impacts each family and each community member in a variety of ways, and kind of what the domino effect of that is. So I just really appreciate and I'm grateful for how collaborative in nature all of the work that you do is. And I love a good safety plan. So I am excited about future opportunities for participating in some of the activities and exercises that you mentioned. So thank you all so much for what you're doing.
Appreciate that. Okay. I guess I'll see. Hey, if you don't mind, are you okay to hop off, go back to work?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. I really do appreciate you going through this presentation, and I think you can safely turn it over to Tony.
Hey, you got it, Tony. Thank you. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Tony Foster. I'm the director of the Douglas County Emergency Communications Center. If I can get this to work here, there we go. We've, me and Jeremy Rabb, my deputy director, have been newer in position. I've been with the center for the last 10 years, but been only the director for the last 12 months. And Jeremy has also been with us for about the last year, and we came into the emergency communications field at the administration level with open eyes, and we really kind of took on the challenge of really dissecting our business and making sure that we're providing the best service for all, not only our citizens but our community partners as a whole. Just a little overview of our primary functions. We are the public safety answering point, or PSAP, for all of Douglas County except the campus of KU. We receive about 43,000 emergency calls and about 175,000 non-emergency calls annually. And we do about 42,000 outgoing calls annually, and that would be for various different reasons for all the agencies that we support. We do support 4 law enforcement agencies and 6 fire departments. And we interface with numerous outside agencies when requested by law and fire departments. So we have constant contact with Highway Patrol, state agencies for wildlife and parks, also the Turnpike Authority, and a lot of the outside regional township fire departments for mutual aid requests and response. We are also the primary owner of the Motorola P25 radio system that is used and operated by the entire county. Our organizational system consists of 5 administrators, and myself and my deputy director, and 3 shift supervisors, or 2 shift supervisor and administrative supervisor. We also have 4 assistant supervisors, 1 for each squad. And our squads consist of 5 people, assistant supervisor, what we call a communication officer 2, or a training supervisor, and 4 or 3 communication officers. They work 12-hour shifts and are manned. They do a rotating 7-day work week over two weeks. So it's a lot of pressure on them to work overtime, and when we're short. I'm happy to report that we are currently with the training staff that we have right now, we are currently fully staffed, which is is not very common in most PSAPs around the area. Actually, most of the PSAPs around the area are between 5 and 7 people down. So we take a lot of pride saying that we are fully staffed here. We keep our employees, which is very important, and we do everything we can to support them. Well, I want to talk about a lot of the projects that we're doing. Currently, right now, as the administration, we decided to really upgrade our PSAP to be the best in the region. And that's to be able to support our local community, to be able to support our citizens, and also to not get so far behind that it takes too much to be able to catch up. So we had to do some of this catch up to be able to do that over the last couple of years. Currently, we are in the middle of our next generation 911 transition from the MARC system to the state system, and actually our cutover date is tomorrow. So we will be on the new state system as of tomorrow, which is very exciting for us. Brings us a lot of technology upgrades for location services, to be able to find people when they're lost, or to be able to locate phones that we might not have connection by voice on the other side. So this is going to basically bring us into the future of what 911 telephone is. Right now, Kansas is the gold standard in the country for next generation 911, and we're happy to be part of that transition. We also have the Stratford Water Tower project that is coming up here shortly. They're going to be replacing that water tower, and we're going to be having to move some of our equipment to that new tower. So you'll be hearing more about that in the future. ECC radio project that Robert alluded to earlier. In the past, each individual department in the county had control over purchasing all their radio equipment. But what we found is that over the time, that radio equipment wasn't maintained properly, and we want to be able to bring that to the county. It's a very large undertaking to be able to do this, but we think that making sure that all the radio equipment is being maintained properly is very important for all of our first responders. It is the lifeline for most of them in the field. Plus also for public works and for the detention centers here in our community, they need to have proper radio coverage also. And by taking over this radio project and taking over the ownership of the radio system and making it under our umbrella, we're going to be able to provide that support to them and make sure that we don't get lost with our radio system again. With that, the next upgrade is the Mpls router upgrade. That's going to be able to bring our radio towers to be fiber connected for IP-based transmissions. So getting away from T1 lines. I know that's a little technical, but the T1 lines are out of date by 2024, where we are required by AT&T to move to fiber. So we're working through that process now. We're also working on report standardization. I know that that's something that we haven't done in the past, and we want to be able to present a little bit more reporting to you, also to the city, to be able to get more standardized reporting to maybe become accredited in some of our different aspects of our profession. Something that we've never really gone down the road of before, but Jeremy and I are very committed to being the best, and we want to get accredited with our professional organizations that we are subscribed to. Genesis P25 monitoring solution and the Astro EUEM monitoring solution, those are projects that we're working on that's going to be able to give us the heartbeat of our radio system, to make sure that it is always working at the best level. We also have projects for the AES encryption for the police department to make sure that they can have channels that are encrypted for various reasons, to be able to make sure that only the people that we want listening to those channels can listen to them. We also have a couple other projects with mark station alerting and the fiber installation here in the LEC. That was part of the next generation 911 upgrade. It is also going to be able to help our IT department in other ways to be able to bring fiber technology into the building. And we're also talking with AT&T about FirstNet Cellular project, which you might have heard of before, but it's for first responders. It's a separate cellular network to be able to give priority and preemption to all of our first responders in the area when something might happen that would clog the system of the traditional cellular airwaves. A couple other projects that we were working on that I forgot to put on my slide is we're also working on the with headquarters here locally with our mental health project and the mobile crisis response team. We're working hand in hand with them to be able to try to bring some technology to their system to be able to make it easy to transfer 911 calls to them or back vice versa. Also being able to be working with their project to make sure that we don't do anything that's going to delay that if it is approved down the road. We want to make sure that we're working hand in hand with them. And we've also just changed completely changed our fire response and how we do fire call taking to be able to get the call handling process to be shorter, to make sure that we can get the amount of resources to the scene of a fire or a medical as quickly as possible. That's been a very large project that we've been working on that takes a lot of training and a lot of relearning inside the center. So it's been taking up a good significant amount of our time. Any questions about the current projects that we're currently working on?
This is Commissioner Portillo. Could you tell me a bit more about your work with headquarters and the rollout of 988 and how 988 will work with everything that you're handling and that go between of 988 and 911?
Sure, that's one of the biggest thing that we're working on right now is just the conversation of what type of calls are going to be handled by 911 and which type of calls are going to be handled by headquarters or the 988 system, because there's a lot of conversation with that because our worlds are a lot different, and what's an emergency to us and what's an emergency to them might be very different in our eyes. So we're working very hand in hand to try to understand. If we come to an understanding of what's needed, and we can actually benefit the person in the field that's having the crisis a lot better, instead of transferring them here, transferring them there, we can work even a little bit more closer. So that's one of them, is that understanding of what can they handle and what do we need to handle, how to handle that. And then when you bring in the MCRT program, is what's going to be handed off to them and how that's going to look, who's going to dispatch them and who are going to transfer those calls to. So there's a lot of preliminary conversations that we're having right now to be able to make sure that we understand exactly how that's going to happen. Secondly, what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to facilitate some technology upgrades for their system to be able to actually give them part of the 911 system, so they can actually get 911 calls to their center. We can transfer them, and then if they needed the transfer from their 988 center to anywhere in the country, or not in the country, but in the state, to any county, they would have one push access to be able to transfer that call to everyone. As long as we're working right now through the 911 Coordinator Council to get that approved. So it's not approved quite yet, but we did bring that to the table and started that conversation with them to try to use some of our technology maybe outside the box a little bit to help another organization, trying to best cover that maybe with a solution that's not something that they had thought of in the past.
Commissioners, if I could add on to that a little bit, and I apologize if you hear some rumbling around here. We've got some work being done above me. I also had some conversations this week as a part of our Behavioral Health Leadership Coalition and a proposal that is going to be coming to the commission in an upcoming work session related to the mobile access team and how our crisis line, and a proposal from headquarters to help stand that up here locally, which was a part of our initiative outlined in the 2018 ballot language. But in addition to that, I know that Tony's been following this, as well as our friends at headquarters. our real hope here is that the state steps in and puts in a funding source to help assist to fund this model. Currently, and it's an unfunded federal mandate. And while it is an important service that we need to provide to our community, we need to have a way for us to be able to fund that service. It's, supporting these operations, the staff to answer those phones, and as well as the technology needed to make these connections are vitally important. So, I think that's something we're watching closely, that, and Douglas County may have to step up first to begin to fund some of these operations. And then, but my hope would be at some point in time, if we really want to see this implemented properly, that there's funding identified at the state level, or, and I think the model or proposal is a fee on phones, which is a model that we use currently for 911 funds and would be pretty easy to implement. But I do think it is running into some difficulty in the Kansas legislature.
This is Commissioner Portillo again. So given kind of the timing of all of this happening, is there any chance of American Rescue Plan funds or infrastructure? I do see this as a part of infrastructure across our country, the same way that 911 has become a vital part of our infrastructure in local communities. Has there been any discussion of 988 funding becoming a part of the infrastructure bill, or parts of the American Rescue Plan being used towards something like this?
I guess what I would say is that, so with the funds that come to us, I think it is definitely something that would be an eligible expense for pieces of that. So I think that's something we can look at as we develop a plan for how we're going to spend those funds. In terms of infrastructure outside of that, the other part of the federal funds that are identified for funding that, what I had heard, it was water, wastewater, and broadband. I think we're doing a little more follow-up to see if there's additional things inside, that could be eligible, but I definitely think it's an allowable expense under the types of funding, what we are allowed to spend our funds for. But that's a great suggestion. I think it's something for us to keep monitoring as we get closer to developing that plan. I also think we could possibly use some of those funds to help finish out this radio conversion project. I think, as you just heard, from Robert, how important emergency management and emergency communications are in responding to this pandemic. And so I do think that is another area where we may look to spend some funds to be able to complete our radio transition process and get in a better situation to be able to sustain that funding ongoing.
It's Commissioner Reed here. Thanks for that thorough list, Tony. I'm wondering if I probably just missed it, and I'm sorry to make you repeat yourself. The fiber installation and implementation, can you help me know where that came from? You said there is a mandate to change all of that by 2024?
Yes, AT&T gave us basically a heads up probably about 18 months ago that by 2024 all T1 lines they're going to quit servicing the T1 lines. Currently T1 lines they're very old technology. It came from probably about 1980, and it cost them a lot of money to maintain the T1 line system. Runs over basically kind of like an improved old telephone system. So they basically gave us a heads up that by 2024 we would have to move away from the T1 lines and go to an IP-based system. So that would be your fiber line. So what we've done is we've actually, with our next generation 911 transition, we had the opportunity, because we had to run fiber for that already. We ran the fiber through to our equipment room here in the LEC during that same process. So we're already ready to be able to switch over to fiber inside our building for that transition. Now the next piece of that would be the Mpls router upgrade, because currently all of our radio towers are connected by what they call a RAD box, which basically switches your T1 line to IP-based communication. So we need to replace those and the extreme switches that are currently inside our radio towers to be able to accept MPLS data, which would run over your fiber network.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was currently what we're working on. And what I have next is what future projects we would like to see, in the, where are we going, where we want to take our center. And there's some lessons that we've learned here in our center over the last 18 months or so with the protests that we had outside our center, with the wildland fires that we had in the county, with the pandemic, that we were not prepared for some of these situations. And what we want to do is we want to look at how are we going to combat these type of situations in the future and be better prepared for that. And what we've done is we've looked very deeply into what they call a pod runner solution. One of them for tactical deployment, and that would be something that it's basically a mobile dispatch center that you can actually put on a back of an SUV, and you can take it to wherever you want to take it and set it up and literally dispatch from the field. So if you have a tornado like the May 28 tornado, which and you might be hearing from Chief Baxter, because when we showed him the solution, he was like, who do I need to contact to get you one of these? So basically you can actually take it to wherever out in the field. You can take it to a fire station. You can take it to anywhere that's ADA compliant, and you can set up a complete dispatch system to be able to run our dispatch, our CAD system, our radios, and even have the ability to support broadband internet through FirstNet for our responders. That would be for tactical deployment. Then we have another powder solution that we would like to look at for mobile dispatching unit and event support. And this kind of stemmed from last year during the protests, when at one point in time we thought we might have to evacuate our center, and we were actually sitting in a situation where we didn't really have anywhere to go. And this would give us an opportunity to be able to set up an entire dispatching unit in another building somewhere and be able to safely evacuate our people and get them to safety and be able to still provide the service and the level of service that we want to for our community. These are very high on our list because we believe that they're that important, not only for our staff but for the responders that we dispatch for. The other pieces of the future projects that we're wanting to inform you about is we currently are starting to get to the point where the amount of effort, the amount of projects that we're taking on, will need to start looking at more people and more funding for people to be able to help support those efforts. One of them is going to be the radio support FTE, to be able to address the maintenance and programming for the entire county radio system. Currently, what's happened in the past is that we kind of fell down a little bit at times with maintaining our radio system, and this would be a person that would be able to do that maintenance for us at a lot lower cost than trying to go to a third-party person to be able to provide this service. That would be touching every radio in our entire county once to twice a year for firmware upgrades, programming upgrades, and what we call auto tuning, which keeps the radio at basically at factory levels at all times. So that way the first responders in the field never have to worry about their radio not working. The next position that we're looking at in the future is a QA, QI, or a quality assurance and quality improvement support function that would be able to help us initiate the accreditation programs through priority dispatch and APCO. It takes a lot of QA and QI to be able to be accredited, and we would need to have that support to be able to do that. And that's something that we think is very important. I know that when we talk to a lot of other leaders, those accreditation standards are highly touted, and it's something that we believe that would bring us to the next level. With the recent changes to our fire medical department, the way we're dispatching our fire medical department, we're needing 4 additional communication officers, because one of the things that we did was actually remove the fire medical dispatcher off of the phones. So we kind of put a lot more pressure onto our remaining 3 call takers to be able to do that job. And to be able to make this sustainable over a long period of time, having the extra communication officers in the room to be able to help support that function is going to become necessary. We're seeing increases in call volume already this year. We're not sure exactly what's causing the increases in call volume, but it seems like there's a lot more activity in the community comparatively to the last year or 18 months. And having that extra person in the room to be able to support some of the functions would be critical. One of the scenarios that we had just recently is with the wildland fires that we were talking about just a little while ago. At one point in time, we had 8 consoles running with supervisors and various people, and then Jeremy was working as a liaison and I was in the EOC, and we almost didn't have enough people in the room. On any given day, we only have 5 people in the room, so we're always on the cusp of not having enough. So I think it's a good time to start talking about how do we bolster these positions to make sure that we do have enough in those critical instances. And then administrative support FTE to help coordinate current and future initiatives and perform daily return to office functions. With the radio program and also with the priority dispatch and APCO accreditations, we're going to have a lot more meetings, a lot more steering committees, a lot more just administrative work to make that function happen, and just to have somebody to help us work through that and make sure that we're doing the best for our people and not just doing the bare minimum.
Tony, this is Sarah. I think one of the things as we progress with these budget requests to just let the commissioners know, I think additional information will be brought forward about what's involved in accreditation,
Sure.
what that gives us, what the advantages are to that, how we can how that helps us stack up. As well as if we invest in additional communications officer staff, to help support, fire medical call handling procedures, what does that actually do to response time? What does it actually do to those kinds of measures so that we can see how that happens? I do want to say that like the radio support position FTE, I really do feel is crucial. Tony, how many roughly radios are a part of your system?
Without counting them, there's over 1,000 radios on our system.
And really these radios are an extremely expensive investment. And if we want to maintain that investment for as long as possible, they have to have the software upgrades and the firmware upgrades in order for that radio to be helpful. I'm actually concerned that some of the radios that we invested when we did the last upgrade would have lasted longer if we had a position that could have maintained the maintenance. these are all proprietary radios. You can't just take them to anyone to have these kinds of improvements done. So it's kind of one of those things that if we don't invest in the maintenance, we won't have the asset as long as we need to as we move forward through those efforts. So I think that we will bring additional information forward on how it supports these operations. And Tony too, I think with those communications officers going back in time to kind of pre-COVID and how call volume related pre-COVID and where we are now would probably be a helpful part of that process.
Yeah, there's a lot of data that we can bring. I try to keep it pretty succinct for this because I know I only had a half an hour. So I could probably talk about this for a couple of hours. So there's more to come. I just wanted to kind of highlight just where we're at right now. The last slide that I have is just basically future challenges. What do we see, in the future and down the road? Maybe not immediately, but things that are only going to get more concerning. And the biggest thing is just space needs. With bringing in the radio project, is we're going to need some space to be able to handle that and have a small workshop to be able to touch 1,000 radios every year. Plus also, we're pretty cramped right now inside of our room, and we struggle actually with the distancing with the pandemic. And I'm blessed to say that we never had COVID inside our center. We are one of the only centers in Kansas that did not have COVID inside the center. And if we did, we would be very hard pressed to be able to separate or to be able to even clean the center because we don't have the space to be able to move people around. So we cross our fingers. We're hanging in there, and we're doing a great job. It's my staff's attention to detail with cleaning and making sure that they're doing the proper things that have kept us there. And but to be able to have a little bit more space to be able to look forward and see what the next situation, are we going to be able to meet those challenges at the same time. And then continuity of operations to address current and future crisis situations where staff needs to be safeguarded from current threats. There's a couple of different things. Part of that space needs, and then also some of that is in the next one also, secure parking for our staff. During some of our recent situations, we've actually had some interactions with the public, with our staff that are unpleasant, that we really want to make sure that we're keeping them as safe as possible and making sure that they are safeguarded for any situation in all situations. And then a technology package to support townships and consolidated fire district number 1 to enhance the situational awareness. Currently, right now, the city and the sheriff's department and the law enforcement side of the house and the city fire department, they get a lot of technology to be able to give them updates to information while they're responding to an emergency. And the townships and the consolidated fire district number 1, they struggle with that. A lot of times they don't have very much information. And to be, future challenge of down the road, is there a solution to be able to bring them that same type of information to them and make sure that they have the same information that the other responders have, because we do have a very dynamic world out there, and the call volume is only getting higher. So I'm pleased to present this to you. We're very excited about what we're doing, and my staff is they're everything in a 911 center. That's your staff is you can have technology all day long, but if you don't have a great staff, you don't have anything in this world, in the dispatching world. And I'm very, very happy to announce that on the 16th of March, the governor signed on to say that our dispatchers are now emergency responders in the state of Kansas, which is something we've been fighting for a long, long time. I'm getting emotional about it, to be honest. I was behind the console for 10 years and worked with some of that stuff. And it's hard to live that life and be called a clerical worker at the end of the day, because that's not what they are. They are emergency responders. And the next push is going to be getting that at the federal level. But I just want to highlight that. Next week is Telecommunicators Week, and we'll be coming back next week to get that proclamation, and I hope you support that. And it's been a pleasure talking with you today.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you so much, Tony. We really appreciate the presentation and look forward to seeing you next week for the proclamation.
Thank you.
And
Tony,
Sarah,
Tony, this is
ahead.
Commissioner Kelly, just a couple of quick questions. One, I want to make sure I understood. If we have, is there no redundancy in our emergency communications right now? It sort of sounded like, Sarah, you're giving me that look. Is that why is there some redundancy? If we had something that happened at the communication center, that concerns me. Did I misunderstand that?
There's some redundancy in some of our systems, but as a total package, there's not 100% redundancy in our system. We did have an agreement with Johnson County to have a backup center there. But with the change to the next generation 911 system, we have to, we're now going through the process of switching that to another county to be able to for phone and 911 redundancy. Our radios have a redundancy within its ring within the county and the KDOT system. But there's some systems that we use on a daily basis that we do not have redundancy with. Are they critical systems? No, but are they systems that we rely upon to do our mission? Yes. To be able to get and gather more redundancy within our own county and be more self-sufficient, to be able to have a backup that we control instead of another county controls, I believe is important, because in reality, in my estimation, is if we're going through a crisis here, the odds that county next to us is going through a crisis also is very high. So are they going to be able to support us in that situation, or are we going to have to be able to take care of ourselves a little bit more? And that's the goal at the end of the day.
Tony, talk a little bit about, though, the role of KU as a backup PSAP. I think that's more what I think Commissioner Kelly's trying to refer to.
KU is a backup PSAP for us. The only challenge there is they only have one console for us. Our call volume would flood their center, and it used to be a very viable situation probably 10 years ago when we first started, when we had KU as our backup. Current call volume would be very difficult for that center to be able to maintain or entertain bringing us there, to be able to stand up our center, to be able to give the adequate amount of service to our citizens.
So it sounds like we do have redundancy, just maybe not as ideal as we would like, is sort of okay. Because in the discussion about Pod Runner, that was sort of, maybe I misunderstood that. The second question I had was, you're to be commended for being fully staffed in emergency communications. That is not easy to do. That is really challenging. And I just want to know, Tony, why do you think that is? I mean,
well,
maybe you don't want to give away your secrets, but that's just fantastic news.
I will say some of it is luck, to be honest. We got some new communication officers that came in that had experience even from outside the area, moved into the area, and we were just lucky enough to be able to to recruit them and get them to come to our center. And then I think the other piece of it is we've worked really, really hard on retention. It's very hard to keep staff in this industry. And we've done things like we started a brand new recognition program. We're listening to them. We're engaged with them, making sure that their needs are met, and making sure that we're doing everything we can to support them and make the center a place that they want to come to work every day, and that's important. So I don't think it's a secret. I think it's just that we melded around our people and made sure that they are the most important, function of our business, and that's key.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm sure a little bit might be luck, but a lot of it is your thoughtful leadership. So I appreciate having a fully staffed emergency. That is a very stressful job, and I am very pleased to hear that they're now considered first responders and that we're fully staffed. So thanks for your leadership there.
Well, thank you all. I believe that we will recess until 5:30 for our business meeting. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.